Hey guys, so here is part two of your notes. So, week two, part two of your notes and lecture. So, we left off on this slide here. We're going to talk about the steps that you would need to go through to be hired as a police officer. These steps are specific to New York State. Any department, police department, doesn't matter which agency, it doesn't matter city, town, village, county, and even the state police, they all follow the exact same steps when they hire police officers. So you'd have to go through these steps no matter where you go. And honestly, most other states have a very similar process, as well as the federal government, the federal agencies. So again, you're going to copy these down, and your heading here is steps to be hired as a police officer. And you just continue from your notes from the first video. The first step is you have to take and pass the civil service exam. And this is again true for every department, every agency that you might want to try to get a job. The civil service exam, it's a written exam, and it tests for memory for facts and information, preparing written material in a police setting. So they are going to test your grammar, your spelling, your sentence structure, your flow of ideas, flow of information, because in our line of work, and I know you haven't learned this yet, but in police work especially, well, really the entire criminal justice field, there is a ton of reports and forms of all different kinds that you have to fill out on a very regular basis. And those documents, those forms, those reports are legal documents. That means they are brought into court and used against people. So if you made an arrest and that person is facing these charges, your police report, your arrest report is a very big deal. And it has to have all the information that it needs to have, but it also needs to be professional, and it needs to be written at a professional level. So a basic skill is having good reading and writing, and that's one of the things that they're going to test you for on the civil service exam. Another thing that they're testing for is your reading comprehension, reading, understanding, and interpreting written information. Again, you are applying and enforcing the law. You are going to have to read the law and be able to understand it and interpret it and apply it to real world situations. That's a pretty high level of reading comprehension. Applying written information, rules, regulations, policies, procedures, etc. So I already mentioned laws, but in addition to laws, your own department will have policies and procedures, and you need to be able to understand those so that you can follow them appropriately. One of the reasons that I, make you guys do as much book work as I do, your textbook, reading those pages, doing the weekly homeworks on your pages, doing your chapter tests, because that is all reading comprehension. And you know what? Everybody can improve. Your reading ability is like a muscle. The more you use it, the better and stronger it will become. So just keep trying, keep at it, and you will get better and better. The more you read, the better you will get. So there's a note in blue here, and it says that you must score a 70% on the civil service test to pass. But you also must be reachable on the list. And that is usually in the 90s, the 90%. There's a lot of people. You have to realize that a lot of people are going to take this test the same day that you do. And there may be hundreds. I can tell you that the New York State Police, typically, when they give an exam, because it's the whole state, right? It's all on a particular day, Saturday morning. all across the state of New York, this test is going to be given. There are typically over 2,000 people that will take that exam. 2,000 people, and you might be one of those 2,000. So it is competitive. It is a competitive process, and you must pass each part to advance to the next part. If you fail this test, you do not get to go forward. You have to take the test again. So what do we mean by reachable on the list? Well, when those people, whether it's 100 people, whether it's 2,000 people, they will all be put on a list by score. So the highest score first, the second highest second, and so on and so forth. So just to keep things really simple, I have an example here. And we're going to pretend that 5 people took a test. Let's just say for the Troy Police Department. The Troy Police Department is looking to hire 2 people. 2 people. And 5 people took the test. Well, 5 people are not going to get a job. Only 2 people are going to get a job. So when they took the test, here's how their grades came out. So Bill got a 96. He was the highest score. That puts him at the top of the list. Maria got a 94. She's in second place. Kelly with a 93. Bob with a 90. And you got an 85. 85 is not a bad grade. But in this scenario, it's not good enough because there's only 2 spots. There's only 2 people that are going to be hired. And you have 4 people that did better than you. So the department is going to start with the highest and work their way down. Now, people do wash out in the hiring process farther down the road. The next slide we're going to talk about is the PT test. There are a lot of people who will do great on the civil service test and then fail the PT. They're done. You're done. You have to start the process all over again. There are no do-overs. Okay? So I don't want you to feel discouraged about the civil service test and not be overly nervous about it. You can prepare for it. There are study guides and there are books that you can buy, and I have some in my classroom that I will show you. But you can buy these books that have all kinds of practice tests in them to help you get better and better at taking them. And by the way, the civil service test is also timed. So you don't have forever to take it. It's usually a few hours. So you can practice, you can prepare yourself, and you want to do the very, very best that you can because it is competitive with the highest score people get called first. And so when we say you have to be reachable on the list, it means you have to do well enough that they can get down to you with the score that you got. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2, as I mentioned, is your physical training test, PT test. And basically there's 3 parts. Push-ups, sit-ups, and a run, just as you see in these pictures. Push-ups, sit-ups, and a run. And, so you should write this down, step 2, PT test, physical training. And here's what you have to meet. And you don't have to copy all that, but this is just for your information. So the females have one category, males have another, and then they split you by age group. So you guys would be in the 20 to 29 age group. You have to be able, if you're a female, you have to be able to do 35 sit-ups in a minute. The guys have to do 40. For the push-ups are not timed, so you can take as long as you want, but you have to do 18. And for the guys, you have to do 33. And then your run is 1.5 miles. And for the girls, you need to do your 1.5 miles in 14 minutes, 7 seconds. And the guys have to do it in 11 minutes, 58 seconds. This is non-negotiable. People have failed out for 1 sit-up. They have failed out for 1 push-up. And they have failed out for 1 second short. It has to be, you have to draw a line in the sand somewhere. If you're going to have these standards, right, where's the cutoff? Because if you're going to say, well, it was just one sit-up, okay, but how about the guy or girl next to you that missed two? Well, gosh, it's only one more less. What about me? Right? So you can see that it's a slippery slope. There has to be a cutoff. And here's the thing. You know this. People know this. When they're applying to become a police officer, they know that there's going to be a PT test somewhere along the way. This is not secret information. Nobody's trying to, get you. And certainly from the day that you take the civil service test, the written exam, if you haven't been working out prior to that, which you should have been really, but by that day, for sure, you need to start working out. You need to start getting ready for this. If you're serious, if you're really serious about becoming a police officer, because being a police officer is a serious job and it does require a level of physical fitness. And this is, the basic stuff. So really, there really is no excuse for anybody to fail this test, and yet people do. And what I always tell my students, you guys, is when you're working out, when you're training, when you're practicing to take this test, always do more. Do more push-ups or more than the minimum, right? Push yourself to be able to do 25 push-ups, or if you're a girl, or 40 push-ups if you're a guy. Always do more. For the sit-ups, girls, if 1 minute is the time and you're supposed to be able to do 35, make sure you can do 40. Why? Because God forbid on that day of the test, you don't feel 100%. Maybe you got a head cold. Maybe you've been run down. Maybe you've been sick. Maybe you're just nervous. And those things can impact your physical performance. So if you always, when you train, do more than the minimum, you can be sure that when it comes on a test day, you're ready. You can get that minimum that you need to get because you've been doing more than that the rest of the time. Okay? Don't look at these numbers and go, well, as long as I got that, I'm good. Always do more. So if you pass all of that, you go to phase 3, part 3 of the hiring process. What do you got it? Oh, you know what? Before we move on, I got to say this. And there's a video here. I'm not going to take up time in our video playing you a video. I will share the link if you want to watch that. You can see it. But this video is showing that there actually is a proper sit-up. And I don't have it in here, but there's also a proper push-up. And they'll explain all this to you when you get there. But again, it's better for you to be practicing it the right way because they're not going to count a sit-up or a push-up that does not meet the standard. So I can tell you here with the sit-ups, your hands, they can be at the sides of your head or they can be behind your head, but they may not be interlocked. So you're not going to be able to pull yourself up. And that's what interlocking your fingers does. It helps you, right, pull yourself up. So if those hands come off your head during the sit-up, that doesn't count. That one doesn't count. If they see you locked, that's not going to count. Your elbows, when you come up, you have to come all the way up. And the elbows either touch the knees or go past the knees. You're not going to be able to do a halfway and have it count. They're going to tell you it doesn't count. So don't, put a lot of energy into doing the wrong technique and then they don't count and you don't make the minimum. And the push-ups, there's, again, a standard or a technique that's considered proper. And we can talk about that in class. So the third step is a physical exam. So this is where you have to go to a doctor and they have to clear you. They're going to check your heart, your lungs, your joints, your reflexes, your hearing, your eyesight. And ask about illnesses that you have or medications that you're on. Of course, there's going to be a drug test. And they need to make sure that you're physically able to do all of the duties and activities that being a police officer will require, right? It's going to require you to stand for long periods of time. It's going to require you to walk for long periods of time. It's going to require you to run and sprint from time to time. And you also will have to engage, unfortunately, but realistically, you are going to get into physical struggles with people. You're going to get into fights with people. So you have to be able to do that without putting yourself or other people at risk. So you can't have a condition that would prevent you from being able to do those things. So once, and again, you have to pass each step to go on to the next. So if there's anything that you have, and I can tell you, for example, most color blindness, not all, but most color blindness, if you're colorblind, and a lot of people are, it is probably going to disqualify you, because you have to be able to see the difference between green and red when you're a police officer. You're in a patrol car and you're driving 8 hours a day at a minimum, and it's a huge liability. And responding to calls or responding to emergency calls, you have to be able to distinguish red and green, and a lot of people that are colorblind don't have that. So you pass each step along the way. So we're going to say you pass the third step here, the physical, and then, oh, wait a minute. Oh, there's the vision. I'm sorry. So vision, uncorrected. This means without glasses, without contacts, your vision cannot be worse than 2100 in each eye, and it must be able to be corrected to 20/20 in each eye. Correction may be achieved using glasses, contact lenses, or surgery. And then my note there at the bottom is color blindness is disqualifying. What do you think the logic is between this number? Why is this the number that your eyes can't be worse than that, uncorrected? We'll talk about that in class. So now we get to our next step, which is a psychological evaluation. There are two parts to the psychological exam, and the first is a paper-based exam that asks you 100 to 200 opinion-based questions. This is kind of getting into what are your attitudes, what are your beliefs, what is your ability to deal with stress, what is your ability to cope with, tragic situations, etc. And that doesn't mean that we expect you to be robots, or we expect you to be, not affected by anything. You are going to be affected. But the question is, can you function? Can you do your job, even though you're dealing with something that's very upsetting? Because there are a lot of people who have a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety in their regular life. Anyway, they have anxiety. So somebody who has anxiety maybe is not going to be cut out or a good fit for a job that inherently has a lot of anxiety, right? So this is the first part of your psychological. And then the second part is you will actually sit down with a person, a psychologist, and they will interview you, and they will discuss your answers that you put on the first part, on the written test. So what are they going to ask you about? What are they going to try to determine? And this is not an exact science, and this is not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And for sure, there are some people who have like huge red flags. They were like, no, this person is not going to be a good cop. And obviously you can make the argument, well, there's a lot of people that should have never been police officers that got through. And that's true. It's not a perfect system. And to be honest with you, sometimes the job itself changes people, right? Like you star and you're very optimistic and hopeful and idealistic, and you're just there for all the right reasons and you want to help people, and then year after year after year of seeing, just the most awful things, maybe that changes you to be a more jaded person. So let's just quickly talk about the bulleted list here. As I mentioned, how well do you cope with stress and adversity? Do you have any prejudices or biases? Obviously, that's a huge issue, and it's being talked about pretty regularly in all corners. This is not a profession where you can have biases or prejudices that you're going to act on, that you're going to treat people differently. Obviously, anger issues. People are, most people don't ever deal with the police until they're having what is probably the worst day of their life, right? That's the whole point of the police. They're there when there's a problem. And sometimes it's a minor problem, sometimes it's a major problem, but either way, it's a problem. And people are emotional, people are upset, people are angry, and very often it gets directed at the police officer. How are you going to handle that? How are you going to handle being called names, having, just really hateful things said to you? You got to be able to deal with that. You're not going to be able to react with the same emotion to the citizen. What about depression? Because you will go on tragic calls, death, children, homicides, accidents, just awful, awful things, abuse, child abuse. And these are really difficult things, and you have to be somebody that can handle it. If you're coming into the job with depression, you're coming into the job with anxiety, you may not be the best fit. And honestly, I don't know why you would want that in your life if you're already dealing with those kinds of issues. And do you have any mental health diagnoses or issues? And whether in general, your personality is a good fit for police work. And we can talk a whole lot more in detail about this kind of stuff in person, but just to get you thinking about that, when I said, do you have the right attitude? Do you have the right outlook? That's what we mean about your personality. Are you there to really work with people? Do you like people? Because you need to like people. It's a people job. So those are the things for the psychological. If you pass the psychological, you move on to the next step. So we're already up to step 5. And the 5th one is a polygraph, which is a lie detector test. And the purpose is to find out any negative information that was not discovered in your background investigation. And we didn't talk about your background investigation yet, but we will. And to determine that you will be honest no matter what. Never lie. Listen, nobody is perfect. Lots of people made stupid mistakes when they were younger, when they were teenagers. Does not mean that you can't become a police officer, but number 1, you have to be honest about it. Number 2, how serious was it? Number 3, do you take responsibility for it now and or then, or you somebody like, oh, it wasn't my fault. That's like, do you know how many times cops hear that? It's always somebody else's fault, right? Okay. You got to take responsibility for what it was. You got to be honest about it. And how much time has gone by from the mistake that you made to when you're trying to be a police officer? Because obviously, the more time that goes by that you haven't had any problems, haven't been in any trouble, the better that's going to be for you. But like if you just got arrested 6 months ago, probably not going to hire you. So I would say if you have had trouble in your past, today, this minute, right now, that stops. no more trouble, no more problems. And this includes speeding tickets. This includes accidents, driving record. It matters because, again, you're driving a car 8 hours a day, and that's a city vehicle. It's a city or it's a government agency, and they're liable for you. If you do something wrong, you get in an accident, they're liable. That means they're going to have to pay out a lot of money because you wrecked or maybe hurt somebody. So I got to pick somebody who has perfect driving record, somebody has a bad driving record. I'm going to go with the one that has perfect driving record. Keep your driving record clean. Keep your criminal history clean. If it's like too late, you've already got something, just no more trouble. And of course, felonies are going to automatically kick you out. I'm talking about misdemeanors, lower level stuff. And, like 1 or 2, not 25. So they're going to ask you those kinds of things. Have you ever committed a crime? They're not asking you if you've ever been arrested. They're asking you if you ever committed a crime. Lots of people commit crimes that don't get caught. So that's think about that and think about how honest you need to be when you take this test. And we can talk about the science behind it and how exactly it works when we see each other in person. So the background investigation is step 6, as I mentioned. And what is that? They are going to get all up in your life. They will go, and it depends on the agency, but I can tell you, like the FBI, the federal agencies, they will go all the way back to childhood. They will go to your employers, current and past employers, to talk about what kind of an employee were you, what kind of, how much sick time did you take, just things like that. They will talk to your friends, your family. They will talk to your neighbors, and not just today's neighbor, but every residence you've had for like the last number of years, and go see those people as well. They will check your school records. They're going to check everything, your financial background, etc., because this is who your character is, right? Just because maybe you never got arrested, you never got convicted of any crime, but maybe nobody thinks you're a very nice person. Well, that's not anything that's going to be on a piece of paper anywhere, but it's, if it's several people that have the same thing to say, it kind of paints a picture. So we're going back to character. You have to have the right personality to do this job. It's just too important and too serious. So, again, keep those things in the back of your mind. Moving, breaking up with significant others, quitting jobs, those things are fine. It's part of life. People change, people move on. It's how you do it that matters. If you're renting an apartment and the landlord is gonna up your rent, and you're like, I'm out of here. I can't afford that. I'm gonna go find something else cheaper. Okay, but you don't leave the apartment in a disaster just to be spiteful, just because you're mad that he was going to raise the rent. You see what I mean? So that doesn't go on paper, but if I'm doing your background investigation and I go talk to this landlord because I see that he rented you an apartment for the last year, what kind of tenant was he? Did he pay on time? Did he follow the rules? Did he, leave the property in good condition? And then that landlord is like, oh my God, let me tell you what he did. That's not good. And if I got to go check with your friends and boyfriends, girlfriends, and they have, negative things to say, which breaking up is always tricky, but, you can do it in a way that is decent, right? So I think you guys are probably getting the idea. Background. So here's just another list. They're going to check, they will run your criminal history for sure to see if you have any actual convictions. But they're also going to, find out about your alcohol and drug use. And again, goes back to the polygraph. Have you ever used X drug? Well, what does used mean? Does it mean once? Does it mean 30 times? I would say even once counts. You've used, even if it was to try it. And again, lots of people try things especially in high school, and I'm not advocating that, but they try it, and they move on. That's a very different thing than somebody who is a habitual user of an illegal substance. And that's the bottom line. It's illegal. Whether you think it should be or not, if it's against the law, it's against the law. And you cannot be a police officer if you're going to, flagrantly violate the law. How are you going to go enforce it against other people, but you yourself break the law? So again, that's like another part of being a police officer. You may not agree with every law that's on the books. It's not up to you to decide which to enforce and which not. When you took your oath, when you got sworn in, which is coming, you swore to uphold the law. And so officers don't have that personal choice of, well, I don't agree with that, so I'm not going to ever charge anybody for it. So keep those things in mind. So as I said, they're going to check into your family. They're going to check into your friends, your associates, your school records, your teachers, any discipline issues, grades and attendance, employers and employment history, credit history, how you handle your money, and if you pay your bills on time. Whoops. Because again, that's part of your character, paying your bills on time. Your driving record, as I mentioned, any tickets, any accidents. And again, you don't have to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. Lots of police officers have things. Oh yeah, I had a ticket before. Oh yeah, I had an accident before. Okay. It's how many tickets, how many accidents that paints a picture. So your seventh and final step is an interview. If you pass steps 1 through 6, they will invite you to come have an interview, and that's usually with the higher command staff, like the chief, assistant chief, deputy chief, maybe even a captain. And they're just going to ask you questions. And you know what? They have your application, they have your resume, they have a lot of information about you, but they need to see you in person. They're going to ask you questions off the cuff. You got to be ready. You don't know exactly what they're going to ask you, but they want to get a feel for who you are, get a feel for your personality. And believe it or not, there are people who pass all the steps, but then at step 7 in the interview, they don't come off good at all. And they leave a really bad taste in their mouth. I mean, I don't know. It could be maybe you were rude, maybe you were obnoxious, maybe you were just really uninformed, and you left the room and these guys had a conversation. They're like, I don't see him fitting in here. He's not ready, or, whatever the case may be. So you got to take step 7 seriously, and you want to prepare for it and really put your best foot forward, because it's not done until these guys say, welcome aboard. Okay. So, and I've got the little ear here. You can just listen. I'm going to read this quickly because I kind of just explained it. But the interview is typically with several members of the top command staff, including the chief, and it usually takes about an hour. And some typical questions are, why do you want to be a police officer? Why do you want to be a police officer at this department? Because they want to know that you care about their community. So you need to think about the answers to those questions. Why do you want to work here? You can go work anywhere. Why do you want to work here? Have a good answer to that. What skills, abilities, talents do you bring to us? Right? Like on paper, you might look exactly like 10 other applicants. Y'all did 95 or better on the test. Y'all passed PT. Background came out clean. You passed the lie detector test. Passed the physical. So you're all equal right now. What's special about you? And to be honest, this is not unique to police. This is going to be every job you ever apply for. This is a competitive world. So think about, how do you make yourself stand out? What special skills do you bring to a company or an agency or a department? And then lastly, they're going to give you some scenarios and ask you, how would you handle this? Now, they don't expect you to know the technically correct answer because you haven't had any training yet. You don't know what the law is. They're not asking you that. They're kind of they're probably going to give you like some ethical scenarios to get a feel for your ethics and your morals and your common sense. Like, common sense, logically, what do you think the right thing to do would be here? So those are pretty typical in the interview. So after step 7, the interview, you may or may not be offered employment with the department. If you are, you basically are hired. If you accept it, if you accept the position, you are hired, and then you will be issued your uniform and your equipment, and you will be sworn in with your family and command staff and city officials or town or county or state officials. During this ceremony, you swear to follow and obey the police officer code of ethics, and we have a in-class activity with a code of ethics. So our next picture here is taking the oath and swearing in. And I'm not going to go through all of it right now, but you're basically promising to treat all people equally and with respect, and to follow the law and enforce the law, and to fulfill all of your duties that are expected of you faithfully and diligently. This is a very big day. For a police officer, this is as special as the day you get married or the day your child is born. This is up there in that list of importance. And sometimes, this is just another picture, you may be sworn in with several people that are getting hired at the same time, and you all can do it together. And I just think this is a great picture. Okay. I'm actually going to have to do a part 3 video. I know this is long, but I'm going to pause this here. I'm going to stop it here, and I'm going to go to part 3. So week 2 notes, part 3 coming up.